Hey, welcome back to Real Talk. Thanks for hanging out with us. I'm Brad. She's Michál. You're back.
I am back.
Are you excited?
I am so excited.
Have you been training? Have you watched your first one and you reviewed it and you've been in training?
I did. I had some experts weigh in. There was many a review that my eyebrows didn't live up to Joe's. So I've been working on this one.
Right. You did great. And I'm so glad that you're back. And guess what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about manners. Etiquette and manners. I can't talk about manners with the guy that normally sits in that chair, so I had to wait till you were here to talk about etiquette because the world is really tense right now, right? And kind of people just being mean to each other. And so I thought we would talk about what does it even look like to be civil anymore? Because I think we've lost some of that in the social media age. And so that's what we're going to talk about.
All right, let's do it.
Good. I kind of have a tradition. I like to start with trivia every once in a while. So I've got some etiquette trivia for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here you go. What came first, spoon or fork?
Fork.
Good. How many prongs did it have on it?
Probably 2.
Whoa!
Really?
Yeah, nice. Okay, bread plate. Left of the dinner plate or right of the dinner plate?
Left.
Oh my
Really?
gosh, 3 for 3. Now, this one is tricky. I think this one is hard. Which way, if you're having a meal, which way do you pass the food? To the left or to the right?
I feel like my tendency is to go to the right.
Oh my gosh! 4 for 4! We've never seen this kind of success on Real Talk Trivia
Thank
before.
goodness you saved it for when I was here.
That was so good. Okay, I have a verse for you. Matthew 6, verse 33 says, "But seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness." Okay, so seek first God's kingdom and God's righteousness. So let's talk about the way we interact with people, manners, etiquette. When you hear that verse, does that have anything to do with, can we relate that to how we interact with people? And what would that look like?
Yeah, well, I like how you kept emphasizing the word first because that's what stood out to me. I feel like Christ in that verse is prioritizing for us what we should be prioritizing, right?
Yeah.
So it isn't so much about our agenda, isn't so much about our opinion. It's more about his, right? So what does God's character look like? What are his desires? So are we, and how we're communicating with other people, is any of that pointing back to God, or is it all pointing selfishly back to what we feel like we need to say to everyone?
That's really good. I like what you say about priority, because when we go into a conversation or an interaction with someone, usually we have an agenda, we have a priority. Maybe we're trying to get them to see things our way, or we're trying to get them to understand. But if you just kind of put that on hold and say, no, the priority is God's kingdom and his righteousness, making him look good, that changes things, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So what would be some of the ways that, how would we do that? What would that look like to put God's kingdom first in an interaction with someone? How would we treat them? What would you imagine?
Yeah, well, I think any decision that you see God making throughout the Bible, to me, everything points back to love. So if that's in the forefront of our minds, what does it look like for me, whatever role I'm in, if I'm serving, if I'm having a conversation with someone, even if I'm disagreeing with someone, is any of that pointing back to God's character? Is any of that pointing back to love? So even when you're disagreeing with someone, can you do that in a way that doesn't sound like you hate their guts?
Right.
Do you have any level of respect? Is any of that pointing back to God's character? So just kind of keeping that in mind.
Yeah. Because it kind of seems like we've lost that ability to disagree but not be disagreeable, basically, right?
Right.
Even to ask questions, we question a lot, but just to humbly ask questions of people that are different than us, to try and understand and listen, right? The thing that I thought that came to my mind is, in an interaction with someone, maybe an argument or a disagreement with someone, is, if I get all done with this conversation, are we going to look more like Christ than we did before? Because if not, then we didn't seek God's kingdom, right? If God's kingdom is all of us becoming more like Christ and seeing his goodness in the world, then our interactions with each other should make us more like Christ.
Right. So are we entering into those conversations wanting to, do we care at all what the other person's saying? Or is it just our agenda to blurt out what is so important to us? Or are we taking a moment to actually listen to what that other person is saying?
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think, in conversations that you've had with people, have you seen people disagree well? Like, what are some of the things that you see? What's some of the etiquette you see when people disagree well?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, most of what I'm seeing is online.
Well,
And that unfortunate
people
part,
always disagree well
right,
online.
Exactly. The unfortunate part of that is that everyone's writing from the safety of their computer screen and saying things I imagine they would never say face to face. And it's funny because I feel like I'm having these conversations with my son, right? He's 5 seconds away from full-blown teenager. So we're having these social media conversations.
Oh,
and I find myself warning him about that. Like, hey, people are going to say things that they probably wouldn't say to you in person. And the ugly side of that. And I feel like it wasn't until recently that I realized I feel like I'm talking as though these conversations are limited to middle school and high school kids when it's clear. Look at social media right now, where adults, I feel like even worse, like they're name calling.
Right.
So we're like resorted back to elementary school behavior. That what makes it the worst side of that is that as adults we've fooled ourselves into justifying that because we're arguing about something that we believe passionately to be true, somehow we justify that we can call people names in the process.
Right. And it does devolve into elementary school conversation, right?
Absolutely.
Like you're just waiting for somebody to say you're rubber and I'm glue, or however that whole saying goes.
Oh yeah, well I'm rubber, you're glue.
It's so ridiculous.
Right.
So is there any way to, let's just stay with the online thing. As people interact, is there any way to interact with good manners online, or is it better just to not?
Well, as much as there's these shadow sides to entering into debate online, there is this beautiful thing that we don't get in real life when we're having a face-to-face debate with someone, and there's this little button that you have to click that says submit or post. And so how many of us are writing so super passionately, have our point all beautifully scripted? Are we taking the time before we click that button to really weigh, other than looking for typos, do we take half a second just to weigh and hold it up to some litmus test, hold it up to your verse and say, yeah, I may have made a really good point here, but does any of this point back to God? Is there any bit of love or respect anywhere in what I just wrote? I feel like that's one thing that we can do on social media. I feel like that's a little harder in a passionate argument face to face.
Right. Yeah, it is hard to say, no, I care more about my faith than I do this fight. And I'm just going to I'm not going to post or whatever. And honestly, it might sound too simple. It might even sound a little prudish for people to think, seek first his kingdom, to apply that to conversations. But I really think Jesus is challenging us. If you want to grow, you seek God's kingdom first. And the online conversations that I see, the comments, the back and forth, there's not a lot of seeking of God's goodness there. And so maybe the best thing to do is nothing.
Yeah, don't engage that
way. It's just listen, try and learn, but not always try and convince people. The other thing that I think we have to be really careful of as Christ followers, we get into debates with people, arguments with people, and we got to be sure that whatever we're debating, it actually says in the Bible. Right? Because you hear Christians say a lot of stand really firm on a lot of things that sometimes I'm that's not really in the Bible. And if that's what you're basing your argument on, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Or it is in the Bible and they're twisting
it somehow. Yeah. Okay, so one more question, right? So we've been in quarantine for 6 years, but we're about to come out. And we've been living in two-dimensional world, like Zoom, and it's people are just these flat figures on a screen. So we're going to start interacting with people. And a lot of people haven't interacted with people in a while. So what are some things we keep in mind as far as manners, as far as etiquette, as we start interacting with other human beings again?
Yeah, really, what does that look? Because I feel like the people who weren't huggers previous to COVID-19 are probably going to find themselves desperate to engage in probably awkwardly long hugs at this point. I don't know what that looks like, but certainly we need to up our game in reading the room.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, kind of take the temperature of the room. Do these people how do they want to engage with me? Do they want me to hug them, or are they still wanting me to stay away?
Yes, maybe a read of if they're still wearing matching gloves and mask. That's like a
Don't
keep your
attack them.
distance.
Yes. Good. I like it. So we're going to listen. We're just going to maybe keep quiet some on social media. And we're always going to pass the food, the green beans, to the
Definitely to the right.
right. See, I was going to screw it up again.
No, always
It seems
to
like
the
it should go
right.
left to me.
Are you left-handed?
No. Whatever. See, I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining us today. See you next time on Real Talk.